Here we are at Black Oak Ridge Cemetery in rural Jefferson County, Illinois. There's a good mix of old and newer modern stones here. When meeting with the Board of Trustees, I found that they were just as interested in preservation as well as restoration. And for this veteran stone here towards the back, it faces directly into a fence row, which I'm sure whenever it was laid was just an open field. They'd like to have it turned to face him and the cemetery, as long as that was the way his body was laid out. So my first step would be checking to see where his body was placed. I got my witching sticks out and walked the area, which all that is just two metal coat hangers. And from the looks of things, I was pretty certain that he would be on the east side. I walked the back side just to make sure. No movement in the sticks. Then I got to digging. The first couple scoops I hit concrete in front, which I just thought that they had just put concrete around the stone, until I started coming out a little bit and the concrete kept going. After that, I realized what it was. They had put a concrete surround around him before the stone had been put in. Then I was just worried about the stone being attached. Dug out around it, made sure it was free, then got busy trying to clear off the surround. This thing had been sinking for quite a while, several inches of dirt on top. I try to be careful when I hit around the corners. A lot of these surrounds are laid out like bed frames, and they have corner posts on each side. Up towards the head, those two had been knocked off. I definitely didn't want to knock off the ones down at the feet if they were still there. Gave me a little bit of trouble over there on that left side. Tree roots had taken over. After I had it all cleared off, got the dirt off the top, I needed to see how deep it was. You can see it still had the post down at the feet. There's the corners knocked off. Got out my regular shovel, started digging down towards the foot just to see how deep in the ground it actually was. When I measured, it was about 5.5, 6 inches, with a couple inches on top. Now I wanted to get the stone out of the way to keep from damaging it. Instead of a tripod, I had a cherry picker in the back of my truck, so that's what I used. Try to keep my straps equal and just opposite from each other, as to pull equally on the stone. Put that board down to make sure that if it swung free, it wouldn't slam into the concrete. With the headstone safely moved, I dug around the head area and found a piece of dirt with odd markings on it. Got my hand tool out, started digging around, and come up with several pieces of a big shell. I'm sure that was important, somebody to leave there. I'm sure it was no small feat getting from here to the ocean back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. My original plan was to try to raise up on the head, move to the foot, raise it up, back and forth until it popped free. I got a little movement in the head, not too much in the middle. After that, set everything up, moved it down to the other end, and had the same. No movement in the middle. Got to looking a little closer and realized why that was. Had a break on each side. After I realized it wasn't coming out in one piece, it was time to start digging. The veteran buried here is Silas M. Wallace. He was born on November 19th, 1844 in Jefferson County. When he was 18 years old, he enlisted in the 62nd Illinois Infantry. He was 5'8", his hair was light, eyes were blue. He was single at the time. His occupation was a farmer. He enlisted twice. First, April 10th, 1862, and then re-enlisted as a veteran December 26th, 1863. When he enlisted as a private, and when he had served his time and was mustered out, he was mustered out as a corporal. After getting quite a bit of digging done, I definitely wanted to dig down around where the cracks were to see how deep they were. Because if it wasn't broke, I really didn't want to be the one to break it. You can tell those cracks go from the top to the bottom, and they're spaced out a little bit. So that made it a little better. Instead of trying to pull it out in one, I knew I could pull it out in two pieces. Got the cherry picker back out, hooked up with the straps. And now with all the dirt and tree roots cleared away, come out relatively easy. I noticed one more crack there at the foot that wasn't all the way through. So I'll end up doing something with that later. When the head started to come out, there was a little bit more down the sides. I really didn't want it splitting in half. So I went and got a pry bar, just pry up on the ends, get them loose. So I was sure it would come out with no problem. Unfortunately, I lost or did not record a very important step. I went around where the surround was and filled them up with river rock and sand with a little bit of dirt. That part there was me putting the dirt on top and then packing it in. Now I've got my epoxy out, washing all the ends, making sure I had a clean surface to work with. This is a string I'd run out with several flags to make sure that when I went back with it, it would go in the exact same spot as when it come out. Now I've got the head placed. I'll mix up my 2-part epoxy, which is a 2-to-1 mix on that. Put a liberal amount on each end and put them together. Wanted to make sure it had good contact when it sat. So I got a ratchet strap out to bring it around and get some tension on it. After that, it was going around with a little more sand and gravel around where some of the low spots were. Plus, it'd make it easier have that laying around there whenever I go back to level it for sure, that it's there to where I can just put it underneath. I'm not sure what was in it, if anything, but we're going to put river rock in it. Put down my black paper, try to slow the weeds down. Nothing really stops them. Little low up there on the right top. Good and level. Come back the next day, took the ratchet strap off. We had a good bond. Going around with the dry brush now, just getting the big chunks and a lot of little dust off. Just water there in the spray jug, spray it down and wet it up. Using a soft bristled brush on my drill. That jug has just a little bit of D2 in it with just very little Dawn dish soap and the rest water. So I'm not so much as cleaning as just knocking a lot of the smaller stuff off. Definitely wanted to make sure everything was out around them cracks so I could come back in with mortar. Let it dry for a little bit while I mix my mortar up. Come back and try to fill in as best I could. Eventually I'll get tired of trying to use that tuck pointer to fill in them cracks. I'll just figure out it's a whole lot faster just to use my finger. I would let the mortar dry. Now it's time to get on the stone. Use the plastic razor blade, scratch off a lot of the bigger chunks, then come back with full-on D2 solution. Definitely wanted to get washed off right there where the stone and the surround would meet, because once it gets set, it'd be impossible. That done, I got the digging. Realized I hadn't marked a center on it for the stone placement. Got that marked, then dug down till I got to my depth. Went about an inch or two lower to make sure I could get a good bed of damp sand and river rock in it before I placed the stone. Just walked it over and slid it down in the hole. Use the old tamping tool, make sure everything was packed down nice and tight. Every level, no matter what, dirt or sand or rock or anything, tamp it down good and tight. Always come back with your level. Always check yourself. Now it was time to clean the top of the stone. Use the same system, a little bit with the plastic razor blade, a little water, a little D2 solution. D2 is not a miracle substance that just turns everything white, but once you get it on there and get the big portion off, it stays on and continues to work for weeks, even months after. There's been stones that I've cleaned that every time I go back out there, they seem whiter and brighter. Just takes a little bit of time. And some of those stains may not come off at all. It may always have a little bit of dark spots on it. But for the majority of it, it'll be gone over time. And there it is. With one important addition. Put the old shell back. Now there's just one last thing to do.